Right, folks, welcome back. Just gone past the top of the hour. We've been around the world pretty much this morning so far, getting into the afternoon here in South Africa. Welcome on board if you're just joining us on Facebook Live or here on Zoom. I'm Ivan Anderson, virtual Trade Fair.global. It's been a stunning session, stunning number of sessions this morning so far. You know, we started off in South Africa, went to New Zealand, came back to South Africa, went off to Perth, came back to South Africa, and now we're off to England. So it's truly global, truly worldwide event, and then some absolutely stunning presentations and content so far. So if you've missed it, pick it up on our Facebook page. If you're currently online, please like it, share it, love it, send it around. And also, please get onto virtualtradefair.global and visit our exhibitors. Pop in and have a look at our sponsors and our corporate partners, and give them some love and some support as well. We'd really appreciate that, and get across to the exhibits and the exhibitor stalls and see what's on offer on the actual show itself today. But most of us have been rooted to our chairs this morning right here, and I don't think this next session is going to be any different. We have Edward Chapman, the trail running man. Let me get that right, the trail running man. Edward Chapman from the north of England. Amazing man. Had the privilege of spending many weekday mornings with him over the last little while on our Wisdom's chat sessions. So I got to know him pretty well. So he's calls himself very fondly a recovering accountant, and we do bless him for that. You know, we do understand those challenges, but become a runner in his later part of his life, and I think has learned many lessons from some fairly extreme races. And Ed also enjoys getting out into the bush. Don't know if you have bush in the UK, do you? Yeah, but anyway, out into the wild with his little tent and then around the world. So, and he's one of the few people in the world, I think, who has a green number for the extreme Kalahari Desert race, which is in Augrabies in South Africa. So he's a very special man doing some very unusual things for an accountant. But I'm going to tee up Ed's recording. Unfortunately, his sound from the UK for some reason this this afternoon is not great. So we'll play the recording, but Ed will be online and engage on the chat. So let me get that up and running, and we'll take the session away. So Ed, if you want to switch back your video, I'm sure you can, because we're just going to have you on the chat. But let's get the video on the share.
I'm honoured and a little bit intimidated to be on this event with such a great lineup of speakers. A big thank you to Lee, Ivan, and Trevor for inviting me. I joined their morning Wisdom's chats a few months ago, and since then I've been sort of drawn in, but I'm really happy with that because those Wisdom's chats have been very useful, very interesting, and I'd recommend to anyone they drop in one morning, just see what's being talked about, maybe contribute. A very good way to start your day. So a little bit about me. I had a pretty conventional upbringing. I had a little bit of a wobble when I was a young man. I was a bit of an angry young man, maybe a rebel without a cause. And then I got things back on track and I studied to be a chartered accountant. And I know people like to think of accountants as boring and responsible for all the ills in the business world. However, I'd just like to remind you of the words in the Shakespeare play, The Merchant of Venice. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? My life as an accountant was pretty much as I imagine you think it was. And then I discovered running and things started to change. I started to travel, first to the US for the Boston Marathon, and then South Africa, Morocco, Nicaragua, the Arctic, Bhutan, which is the least visited country in the world, and then all over Europe. And running has taught me a lot about myself, about life and about business. It's also given me a lot of time to think about things. When you're at the back in an ultra race, and a lot of ultra races don't have big fields, you spend a lot of time on your own and you have plenty of time to think. And it's through that lens of thinking while I've been running that I've reviewed my experience as a chartered accountant. And that has made me realise that the traditional accounting system has driven business behaviour, the economy and social change in a way that is not desirable. But before examining that big subject, I want to touch on how my running experience is going to help you rebuild your business in the post-COVID world. My first big lesson came in 1999 when I ran the Comrades. So it's something that many South Africans might actually have already found out for themselves. I know of no other race that has permeated a country's society as much and as deeply as the Comrades Marathon. It is simply the best road race in the world. I could say the best race in the world, but I'm a trail runner. In a standard marathon at about 20 miles, which I think is about 32k, you hit the wall. That doesn't happen in Comrades. At about 40 miles, 64k, the wall falls on you. And that's what happened to me in 1999. And I discovered that despite there being thousands of runners and hundreds of thousands of spectators and brilliant sunshine, at that point, Comrades is a very dark and lonely place. And the only person who could help me get out from under that wall and make a plan to get to the finish was me. And on reflection, that made me feel very liberated and empowered. I was in charge of my life. I had to make the decisions. No one else could do it. And that meant no one could control me. No one could mess my life up. Only I could do that. Or I could make it work. Okay, life might deal me a poor hand of cards, like burying me under a wall when I was trying to run. But how I played that hand was up to me. And you can win a game of poker with a really bad hand. So there's something you can use to rebuild after COVID. It's your mindset and attitude that's important, not the circumstances. Of course, businesses and life are not just one hand of poker. It's more like a tournament. So if you're not going to win with the hand you've got, fold early and take the next opportunity. There's a saying used by management consultants. I'm not a fan of management consultants, even though I worked as one for a while. And that saying is fail often and fail fast. And I think that's nonsense. I much prefer succeed often, fail occasionally, and fail fast. Perseverance is a great quality, but not when it's applied to something that's never going to work. I'm known for just sticking in there and grinding it out to finish a race. I also know when to quit. It's not been often, but every time it's been the right thing to do. And on a couple of times I wished I'd quit earlier. And I think I've only quit twice. I first met the great Bruce Fordyce in 1999. And they say never meet your heroes because they'll disappoint. And there are some negatives with Bruce, but overall he does not disappoint. He's a big fan of Comrades. He helps Comrade runners. And he gives talks to first-time international Comrades Marathon runners. And in 1999, he stressed that we were lucky because it was a down run. On the down run, your quads take a terrible pounding on the long descent into Durban. You can hardly walk the day after, and stairs are a bigger challenge than they were to the Daleks. That doesn't happen after an uprun. Even days later, you still walk funny. And that is why Bruce says you're lucky. When you fly back home and you go into the office, you'll walk funny. And people ask, what happened? And then you can tell them, and that's why you're lucky. And if your business has been trashed by COVID-19, you may not feel lucky, but you are. Think of someone who's just been getting by, just bumping along the bottom, and he's seen a downturn because of COVID of, say, 10%. They'll make a few savings in their personal expenditure, so now they're still getting by, bumping along the bottom, just with a bit less money. You, on the other hand, will have to make big changes, pivot, or totally start anew. And you have the kick up the backside to build something great, and that's why you're lucky. After a few Comrades, I met the organiser of the Kalahari Augrabies Extreme Marathon at the Two Oceans Expo. South Africa has been very good to me. And my love of multi-day races in the Kalahari started then. Before that, I'd completed the Marathon des Sables and said never again. But there you go. Events like Comrades teach you lessons. Multi-day events are masterclasses, particularly around goals, motivation, tricks to keep you going, that sort of stuff. And an important lesson I've learned is you must have a compelling vision. And for me, it's a bottle of Cold Castle lager. It works well. I finished the Kalahari race 12 times, and it has that's every time I've attempted it, and it has a very high dropout rate. I wrap a lot of stuff around that bottle of Castle Lager. I can see the condensation on the bottle. I can feel its coldness in my hand. I can feel the extreme pleasure as I taste it. And I can see what's happening around me. I can hear what people are saying. I picture the hug from Nadia and the handshake from Estienne, two of the race organisers and the people I met at the Two Oceans Expo. I wrap all the good things around the image of that bottle. All my senses are involved. And that's what motivates me to finish when others wither in the heat and are defeated. And it's how that vision of what you want has to be if you want your business to succeed. It has to be an experience for all the senses and compelling, and it has to be important to you. A vision of a well-beating tech business isn't going to work if creativity and spending quality time with family is what you want, unless that business can deliver that. It's what's important to you that matters, and it's what success looks like to you that matters. Success to me is spending time in nature. I don't want an Armani suit. It would probably look like a potato sack on me, and I don't want a fancy car. Other people want those things. If your vision, if your why is not powerful and personal to you, when things get tough, it just won't work for you. We are all unique. Someone else's vision will not be right for you. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned from multi-day races is they strip you bare. You're spending so much energy just surviving each day that there's nothing left to maintain the facades we all put up. I listened to a great webinar recently by Cheryl Miller, A Post-COVID World's Calls for More Authentic Leadership, where she talked about covering. Covering is where we hide up the bits of our true self, thinking that if people saw them, we'd not get on. For example, a female executive may not talk about her children, thinking it will show her not to be career-oriented. Cheryl has written a lot of articles, so if you search on her name and the topic, you'll find all sorts of interesting things. I should point out she started her career as an accountant, so maybe I'm a bit biased. So applying my desert experience to businesses, I know you'll have to work hard to build a successful business post-COVID. So don't waste energy covering stuff up and building facades that hide the real you. And let people around you be the real them. What was covered up to fit in pre-COVID might be just what's needed post-COVID. If you strip the business down to what is real and what is you, it'll be easier to build and it will align with your vision. Cheryl says, and I agree, the COVID-19 crisis has revealed two things within us. Firstly, a greater appreciation for intangible things in life that money can't buy: family, recreation, nature, community. And secondly, an even greater intolerance for businesses and brands who fail to support the community in its greatest time of need. Which brings me nicely on to the second thing I want to talk about: accounting and the economy. During long hot days in the desert, long cold nights in the Arctic, and while trudging through mud and rain in the UK, I've had plenty of time to think about what my experience as a chartered accountant, and particularly as an auditor, could teach me. As an auditor, I'd sign off accounts to say they give a true and fair view of the company's affairs. With the benefit of hindsight, I realised that although I complied with all the rules and guidance, none of them did show a true and fair view, because that view was too limited and what is considered fair is too restricted. The essence of accounting and the economy is double entry bookkeeping, and I'm going to attempt to explain it in a few words, then illustrate the negative effects that have stemmed from it. Double entry is a simple but brilliant invention that has survived all sorts of changes in the business world, from mechanisation through computerisation to the cloud. And I'm sure the accountants of a certain age will go all misty-eyed when I mention the Kalamazoo loose leaf ledger system. Absolutely brilliant. Double entry mechanised with carbon paper. Now, the first written records of the double entry bookkeeping system go back about 800 years to Venice. And it was used to keep track of what ships' captains were doing. Merchants would give the captain money, he'd sail off all over the place, buying and selling goods, each time trying to get something of better value, and eventually he'd come back to port with his bounty. And it would be shared out amongst the merchants according to how much they'd paid in, with a little something going to the captain for his efforts. Now, the system was simple. Any amount that was written on the left hand of a page had to have an equal amount written on the right hand side of the page of a page or pages. So the initial transaction would have been the total money given to the captain written on the left hand side of the captain's page, and all the individual sums donated by the merchants on the right hand side of the merchant's page to reflect that it was owed to them. And as businesses grew and got more complicated, so did the bookkeeping. But the double entry was never ever broken. Now, the left is called debit and the right is called credit. And what happens to those debits and credits depend on what they are. So when accounts are drawn up, all the pages are totalled up, and debits will appear in the balance sheet and they're considered good assets, and other debits will appear in the profit and loss account and they're considered bad expenses, for example. And the opposite's true for credits. And that is how they've shaped our economy and society, and why that system is no good for our economy. I'll use a real life example from my auditing days to show the harm this dichotomy causes. One of my clients was an engineering firm, and they produced the tips for oxyacetylene welding torches. The holes in these have to be drilled very accurately so that gases mix in the right proportion and it produces a well-focused flame. Now, originally these were all drilled by hand, and then later machines came along. And my client had a mixture of people doing it by hand and machines. And there was one woman, I'll call her Carol because I can't remember her name. She could work faster than anyone else, and she could work faster than the machines. She was on a piece rate and earned more than some of the senior managers. Now, she never talked while she was working. She only took the breaks she was forced to. And on a Friday, when the wages were handed out and the other workers would stop and open the packets and check the contents, she left hers untouched until the end of her shift. Now, the company realised how valuable it was because they had a key man policy on her, which would pay out enough to buy several machines if she died or became seriously ill. It's interesting that even today, 50 years after equality legislation, it's still called key man insurance. I should have told the company not to renew it. I sat next to Carol on the bus going home one evening, and we chatted. She told me that she worked so hard on a really boring job because she was saving to buy a house, and she was 6 months away from realising her dream. She saved enough to buy a house outright, not with a mortgage or what I think you in South Africa call a bond, but outright. And when she'd done that, she was going to leave and get a less well-paid but interesting job. Now, even though Carol and the machine perform the same function, Carol slightly better, and they're both debits, the machine appears on the balance sheet as an asset, plant and machinery, and is revered and looked after. Carol appears in the profit and loss account as an expense, wages, and is something to be frowned upon and hopefully reduced. Now, there have been attempts to change her piece rate and even move her onto a fixed wage, but the initial contract she signed was really good, and the workforce was unionised, so that never happened. Now, the fact that people, often referred to as a company's biggest asset, do not appear on the balance sheet, but instead are a baddie in the profit and loss account, has led to some shameful developments. Not wanting to have expenses when business takes a downturn, companies have dreamt up 0 hours contracts, where people don't know from week to week whether they will have enough wages to put food on the table. Now, in the UK, we've seen massive increases in handouts from food banks, and these contracts have created a great deal of social detriment. It's argued by the companies that 0 hours contracts offer flexibility. But the reality is it's one-sided, and it only benefits the employer, not the worker. This employer-controlled flexibility has been recognised in study after study to have an adverse effect on employees' mental health and physical health. Now, being a debit in the profit and loss account is not a good thing. Being a debit in the balance sheet is. Photocopiers, machinery, vehicles, computer systems, buildings, etc. will have maintenance contracts to look after them. People don't. Some enlightened companies might offer healthcare packages that kick in when you're sick, and some offer gym membership, but how many really care about the effect employment practices have on well-being, families, communities and society? Now, the avoidance of expenses has also led to the gig economy, where people often work long hours or multiple jobs to make ends meet at the expense of family life. What effect will that have on our children growing up and the health of society in the future? Now, hopefully you'll remember that credits on a balance sheet are baddies, so the opposite way around from debits. Well, people used to give rise to credits on the balance sheet due to pension liabilities. And the solution to that problem was simple and brutal: end final salary pension schemes and leave individuals who are least able to bear it to deal with the risks and the vagaries of the stock market. Pension poverty is a disaster just about to hit. And there's a reverse side to all this. The act of employing people is a good thing. Think of Carol buying a house, and all the people are able to put food on the table because they have a job. Profit allows that to happen. And there's a great article written by one of our hosts, Trevor Nell, about the benefits of entrepreneurship. However, all that good stuff and all the bad stuff doesn't appear in the accounts of companies, and so gets overlooked. There are other things that aren't accounted for in the financial statements. In the UK, if you use DPD for deliveries rather than some other companies, there's a big difference. So it's not reflected in the accounts. And if you drink Brewdog beer, there's a bigger difference than if you drink other beers. Yes, I know I've got a thing about beer. DPD is a carbon neutral company and Brewdog is carbon negative. The impacts on the environment, just like the impact on people, are not part of the financial accounting system. 800 years ago, the double entry bookkeeping system did not record whether the captain ill-treated his crew, or whether he ripped off natives when buying spices, or decimated the environment looking for precious metals, and it doesn't today. There have been many bolt-ons suggested to try and account for these things. Perhaps the oldest example is the triple bottom line: profit, people and planet. Unfortunately, that turned out about as effective as putting 2 cushions on the front of a runaway bulldozer to prevent it from causing any damage. Since the triple bottom line, which was about 25 years ago, there's been other initiatives which have proliferated: social return on investment, multiple capital models, environmental full cost accounting, environmental, social and governance, often called ESG, the environmental profit and loss, net positive, blended and shared value, integrated reporting, impact investment, and the Boston Consulting Group's total societal impact framework. And you may be aware of the Boston Consulting Group because of their concept of the cash cow when it comes to portfolios of products. So you can see consultants have a great time thinking up of all these wonderful schemes. So now we've got corduroy cushions, plastic ones, leather, stripes, paisley print, you name it, we've got it. And there's no front runner, possibly because no one wants one. Now, in an article in the Business Review, John Elkington, creator of the triple bottom line principle, wrote, "The bewildering range of options now on offer can provide businesses with an alibi for inaction, too many cushions." And he went on to say, "Worse, we have conspicuously failed to benchmark progress across these options on the basis of their real-world impact and performance." And I fully agree with him on that. There is a bit I don't agree with, and it's when he said, together with its subsequent variants, the triple bottom line concept has been captured and diluted by accountants and reporting consultants. Perhaps there's still a lot of accountant in me and I'm defensive. However, I don't think the system was ever powerful enough in the first place. So even if we did water it down, it was not able to take on the might of the single bottom line profit. Now, 2 years ago, before its 25th anniversary, John Elkington did something quite unique. He issued a recall of the triple bottom line. Now, we're used to seeing product recalls, for example, when Toyota had recalled a large number of cars because the accelerator got stuck, or Samsung recalling the Galaxy Note when airlines got worried about it catching fire. The triple bottom line was the first and possibly the only time that a management principle has been recalled. And at the time, Elkington said, we have a hardwired cultural problem in business, finance and markets. Whereas CEOs, CFOs and other corporate leaders move heaven and earth to ensure they hit their profit targets, the same is very rarely true of people and planet targets. Clearly, the triple bottom line has failed to bury the single bottom line paradigm. Now, if you think this is a bit strong, just think about what Volkswagen did. They introduced a special piece of software into their diesel cars so it would pass emissions test, even though in the real world, the impact they had was as a big polluter, profit above all else. And as far as I'm aware, a properly functioning triple bottom line has not yet been reissued. Now, accountants and particularly auditors are accused of looking at the past, and the unkind describe them as financial historians. While it is true that auditors are looking at the accounts months after the year end, before signing an audit report, they must look to the future, because accounts are drawn up on a going concern basis, and that means the business will meet its financial obligations as and when they fall due, and that it functions without the threat of liquidation for the foreseeable future. If I were to be asked to sign a global triple bottom line audit report, I'd be comfortable with the profit. Less happy but still able to sign regarding people, but the planet is a big problem for me. In the relatively short time since the start of the Industrial Revolution, we have done so much damage that our line of credit is running out. Unless we do something now, in the foreseeable future, we will be liquidated. I would not sign that report. The planet is not a going concern as it is now. As we rebuild a shattered economy, and there's a greater appreciation for the intangible things in life that money can't buy, and secondly, an even greater intolerance of businesses and brands who fail to support the community in their greatest time of need, now is the time to change. It's time to shatter the single bottom line paradigm, so a new one can take its place where profit, people and planet are all important. And I don't know how we do that, but I do know that the answer does not lie in agencies like the UN. Its record on the environment is not good. It does not lie with international accounting bodies, or even with governments. Just like with the merchants in Venice, the answer lies in the hands of people like you, creating businesses that can move away from the hard-wired cultural problems in business and harness the power of profit for the benefit of people and to restore our planet rather than destroying it. You can rebuild the economy so it is better balanced and generates profit not at the expense of people and the planet, but for their benefit. I hope that has done some good and makes you think a bit. Thank you for listening, and I'm very happy to take any questions you may have.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Yeah, that came through very well. I'm so pleased that we decided to make sure we had a bit of a backup there. But I am disappointed that your live sound has not been great. But yeah, let's get you online again and see if we can have some comments and some chat and some questions that you can actually answer, hopefully live. So Ed, if you'd like to unmute and let's see if we can connect with you there. So it is it is not. I wonder if he's even hearing us at the moment. Shame. Yeah, it's a real pity because, as I say, yeah, I think there's some absolute gems in that particular recording there. So, yeah, let's see. We can. My apologies. It's all my fault. It's all my fault.
So until he comes on board, can I push a few buttons?
You can, but yeah, it's all my fault that he was muted because I've got everybody muted and
okay, then I'll stay quiet. I'm not going to argue with this accountant.
Saved by the unmute.
Can you hear me at all now?
We're hearing you, Ed, but it is a bit wobbly, but we are hearing you.
It's really annoying because I've actually borrowed an office that's got better internet, and it was working first thing this morning, but it's not now. And I purposely kept my talk short so we can have a question and answer session and discussion.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because, yeah, as you said this morning,
still not hearing me, are you?
Your sound was good this morning, and that unfortunately it is just breaking up again on us. Yeah, if there are folks that would like to, yeah, that's a suggestion. Ed, maybe you can try getting you on WhatsApp. Have you got WhatsApp on your mobile? We can try that as an alternative solution. I don't know.
It also looks as though he's unplug that and try and talk through his laptop mic.
Yeah, he tried that just now, but
it sounded clearer when he did it.
Trying the laptop mic now.
Have you unplugged it from the socket?
I've unplugged it from the socket.
okay. Well, I've just sent Ed my number so we can connect on WhatsApp, and I'll try playing his sound that way, see if that works for us. But yeah, Trevor, maybe you'd like to just kick off with a few comments while we get up and running.
The button that I really want to push, and I love the fact that Ed kept it short, and he tackled the rebuilding a shattered economy concept by turning around and saying, no, I don't know how the hell to do it, and he's just going to go running. So everyone else came from their specific perspective. But I think what we've got to try and work on here is there seems to have been this underlying tone amongst people that there's mindset, and there's us as individuals have got the responsibility. But at the back of my head, I'm saying it doesn't matter what it is that we're actually doing here, because each and every single one of us are wanting to do positive things. But you have a quorum of individuals who are sitting there at the appointed representatives of an economy, and they're taking the decisions to throw billions and trillions down deep holes that could be making all the changes that we're all talking about here. And no one seems to be addressing that. Why? Or why not?
Can you hear me now?
I'm just going to mute you on the Zoom. So, but yeah, okay, let's try that.
Can you hear me now? Is that any good?
That sounds good.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm very sorry about the problems, but I'll try my best to try and solve them.
Yeah, look, it's the joys of technology, I suppose. There's not much we can do. We got to roll with it as best we can. And but I'm so pleased that we got that presentation on record, because I think there were some real gems in there. So thank you so much for that. I don't know if you picked up what Trevor was nattering on about while we were trying to connect there, but he was.
Yeah, and I think it is all up to us to try and do our best that we can to do it. And I think, Sally made a really good point about being a 10. And I think, that's the thing we need to do, is to realise the powers within us. And I think it was Doyle that talked about chief expedition officer. I think we now need to become chief employee officers and chief environment officers as well. And picking up Ellie's point, we really need to be inclusive about people we deal with and deal with all people. And I think the really key thing is to strip away all that nonsense around layering, about pretending who we are, pretending who we deal with, and then just thinking the environment is the thing that really matters. If you think about COVID-19, vaccine will be the solution. All vaccines are tested on horseshoe crab blood. They are dying out because we're polluting the oceans. Most medical research relies on snake lock anemones, are a thing that live in the ocean, and they get an extract and use a tractor. They are dying out. So what we're doing is we're killing ourselves. Putting the environment first isn't about hugging trees, it's about actually survival. And putting people first is about survival as well. I was talking to a company yesterday who at start of lockdown said they would do whatever they could to look after their staff. And their staff had done whatever they could to look after the business, and they survived. So that's my final thoughts. And if you think the environment isn't important, 4th of October, David Attenborough on Netflix has got a new film out.
Oops, we've lost you, Ed. I think that disconnected for some reason. Ed, I don't know if you can't. Yeah, okay. Ed, yeah, unfortunately we've lost you there. The call disconnected. Not sure what happened. We seem to drop the call. So obviously there's definitely a Wi-Fi issue somewhere along the line. But we got as far as the David Attenborough Netflix release on the 4th, I think you said. But then we lost you after that. But yeah, no, I think it's all fascinating stuff. But I agree with you. I mean, I recall that. Einstein, I think, once said that 4 years after the last bee dies, all the humans will die as well. So, that's one of those keys in terms of actually maintaining the environment, so all things can actually thrive and live. And it's an interesting thing for me that this seems to have been a bit of a theme through this morning, and there was no pre-planning of any of this, but we've had a common thread through all the sessions this morning, which I think is amazing. And for me, and I think many of our speakers have said it today, that's where it starts. It starts with the individual. It starts with people standing up and then putting their message out there and getting more and more people to hear it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. And please, folks, if you want to add in some comments, we've got a few minutes still on up until the top of the hour. I see Trevor's unmuted again. Now you can see Lee's got her hand up. So let me go across to Lee first. Then we'll come across to Trevor, and yeah, if anyone else wants to put their hand up, we can pop across to them as well.
I've had the privilege of sitting with Edward in various wisdoms chats, and so know something of what he's been talking about. And what I found, one of the things that I found interesting about Edward's perspective, and it's a question that I want to ask, and maybe there are others that can also sort of throw in their perspective, is technology, is innovation going to solve our problems with the planet? And I know that Edward's perspective is that sometimes, and Edward, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that technology sometimes perpetuates the problem, even if it seems to be solving the problem at the time. And I think the example I want to use is a South African who actually invented a machine that goes through the water and picks up waste. So Edward's saying, well, what's the point of having a machine that picks up waste instead of changing human behavior that prevents putting the waste in the first place? So that's, it's a chicken and egg question that I'm asking here is, when we talk about rebuilding economies and we're talking about technology, we're talking about business, we're talking about protecting the environment, how do we do it in a way that doesn't create this cycle, but actually moves us forward? And what is it about human behavior that we need to trigger that is going to get us out of the cycle? I know that's a big philosophical question I'm asking.
Thanks, Lee. Yeah, I think it's one of the points that Ed has spoken about before, and I mean, he put a quick comment in the chat box there. It doesn't help keep on cleaning up the messes we make. We need to stop making the messes, and so it's a behavioural change, and it's got to start with every individual. So yeah, I think it's a challenge, and it's an education challenge, and it's a mindset challenge. And I think the things we've been chatting about all day today. Yeah, so. Ellie, I'll come across to you now. I think let me just get to Trevor quickly, and I'll pop across to Ellie. And if there's anybody else, you can.
I'm only there to make a comment if no one else has got a comment. Go to Ellie, please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Lee, just when you were saying that, something just occurred to me. And I mean, this summer I had to create some resources for some young people, to a video resource on Black Lives Matter. And I couldn't do it because my dad was born in Calcutta, my mum was born in England. I don't identify as white or black, and I didn't want to appropriate. Now, from that viewpoint, I got people who this issue affects to create these things. And when I've said to my friends who've been subject to racism in that way, how do people do this? How do we help, and how do we deal with it? And it says like people have to educate themselves. Now, if we look back at life over time, we've always been on a loop, always been on a loop. When I do my trans talks, I can take you back to 4,500 years BC. We've always been on a loop. So I think we almost need to get over ourselves because we think we know everything today. And we need to almost look back in time and find new innovations to actually move us forward. And I do feel we do need to be able to do that, to be able to move forward. Does that make sense? A little bit.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting challenge, isn't it? And we spoke about it briefly, I think, in Patrick's chat about unlearning some of those habits, those thoughts, those things we believe are factual, and actually learning some new stuff. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And as Ed says, we need to break some of the paradigms. Absolutely, I think paradigms are made to be broken. Ed, the trouble is not enough people do it. So yeah, we need to get through on that. So okay, so Trevor, let's get across to you again. Unless there's anybody else, you can put up your hand on the participants box, or you can just
stop me talking. No, I love that. We need to excuse me, get over ourselves. Stop taking ourselves too seriously. But the thought comes to me, and I was listening to Patrick, and it comes through from Sally, and comes through from Ed. That, yeah, and I'm thinking Michael Jackson. I have this view that businesses and profit is absolutely essential to development of technologies, and that they can help provide the solutions to the problems. And that someone was talking about economy, exploitation economics. You know what? I don't think that these businesses exploit deliberately. There are people within them that exploit for greed purposes. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, so these are just random thoughts that I'm throwing out there. People know that I don't bring them to a conclusion, or I do. But perhaps it's the enablers, and who enables these businesses to be successful and to survive. It has to be the consumers, or whoever is channeling their hard-earned money into those particular companies that exploit. So how do you put a stop to it? You stop the flow of the money to them. But then you don't stop the building of quality businesses. And I think that's where Michael Jackson was going. If you want to survive from tomorrow onwards after these changes, you've got to be thinking of all of these elements, and you've got to distract the enabling of exploiters into the type of economies or companies that Michael was explaining in his presentation. Those are just some of my thoughts that have come out of here today.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, so it is, and Ellie just made some comments there. So having empathy for others and the wider world is keys from Ellie. And Ed says Patrick has had the answer, value people more than money. Donovan saying, I agree, Trevor, it's those enablers who passively cause these issues of exploitation. You know, it's, and stewardship is not ownership or exploitation. I think some interesting comments there. You know, for me, as you were saying that, you know, I think it's always a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on the one side, you've got consumers who are buying products, but on the other side, you've got government legislation that is allowing exploitation of certain resources. So if the exploitation of the resources was not allowed, there wouldn't be a market for the consumers to buy from. So I think it can work both ways, in my opinion, anyway. So it is an interesting challenge. So, and Lee is saying a friend of hers made a decision never to buy a magazine or newspaper after the death of Lady Di, to not be a consumer of paparazzi type images. And yeah, I think sometimes it does take consumer activism to change corporate behavior, without a shadow of doubt. As Trevor said, you know, if people don't buy your product, well, you're not going to stay in business for very long, or you're going to have to change something pretty radically. But I think it goes deeper than that. I don't know. Trevor, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just as you were saying that many years ago, and Michael Jackson was around when we did this, there was a shopping center here in our community that were going down the road of not supporting the community. And they didn't realize that the community was together. So I put out my own personal boycott of that particular shopping center. And I've never shopped in it ever again, and it's just down the road. And many other people didn't either, and they ended up losing that shopping center. That's another whole story. But you can individually put a stop to enabling those type of companies that are not doing the things that you would like them to be doing by withholding your spend.
Yeah, it's got to start with you, doesn't it? Dawn, you wanted to add some thoughts in?
Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, I was just thinking, who's the foundation of South Africa? What is the foundation of South Africa? For me, it's the government, and I've worked so hard to contribute to this country, and to see them just squander everything is just heartbreaking. You know, there's so many people out there needing their help, and they're not getting it. So that's the biggest challenge we have in South Africa, and I'm sure many countries have the same thing.
Yeah, it comes back to one of the comments I think that was made earlier in the chat. I think when Patrick was talking about what is actually the role of governments, what should be the role of governments, you know, and you know, again, it's an interesting challenge. You know, I think ours unfortunately has become very top heavy, very bloated, and unfortunately, as we've said, you know, things are not always getting spent where they should be getting spent. But I don't think that's unique around the, you know, in terms of the world. I think, you know, that's a challenge in many countries and many governments. So it comes back to us again, doesn't it? I mean, who did we vote into power, and why did we vote them into power, and do we understand why we're doing these things? So yeah, it's all a very very interesting discussion. And the question is, what are the solutions? And I think, you know, it's been alluded to a number of times today through the different topics. You know, how do we actually as individuals start, as Patrick put it, get our household into order? You know, and it starts with us in the home.
Well, I think we're on the right track then with the virtual trade fair. You know, we're building something for our economy. So I think definitely we're going on the right path. We're giving people a voice. We're giving people a platform to put their products across. We are connecting all over the world. So for me, this is just the beginning. I think it's awesome.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And as I said earlier, you know, I think you know, what we're trying to do here is the start of something. Hopefully, it turns into a movement that has an impact, you know, across across many cultures, across even many continents. And there's Tony. I was wondering where Tony was. He's now in with us. He's our next speaker up, but still got 8 minutes to the top of the hour. So Tony, we just chatting at the back end of Ed's talk. As we're winding up towards the top of the hour. So yeah, and Ellie's just added in another comment here. People tend to vote against things rather than join a positive cause. Yeah, and again, that comes back to mindset, I suppose, at the end of the day, doesn't it? You know, if you're voting negatively, you're probably going to wind up getting negative results. And I think it was one of the things that Sally spoke about quite strongly, is actually getting out of those cycles, getting out of those mindsets, and being the best you, and getting rid of the things that aren't adding value and aren't adding anything to your cause, and removing that out of your life. And so if we keep on focusing on those negatives and voting because it's negative, you know, we wind up trapping ourselves back in that cycle, I think.
And
yeah.
If I can, I hope you can see that we don't have a problem with bees in my garden. I've got 2 swarms here, Ed, that I can actually post back to you. They're nice African bees, not dangerous at all. You know what I also want to add, if I can, please, Ivan. It's all very well talking, as we all know, and I think all of us tend to criticize everyone else that does not walk their talk. And it's perhaps you've got to start connecting with individuals here and turn around and say, okay, you've got a great opinion, but now how do you put it into practice? And one of the things that I keep coming back to is this rebuilding a shattered economy theme. And that is perhaps what we've got to be doing is taking like these tax-free zones. Maybe we've got to test some theories. I suppose this has been done in countries like Russia versus the United States versus China. But is there now this African economics of Ubuntu that has got to start being tested in a bigger area of perhaps 500,000 people to 1 million people? Oh, well, now we're just talking a township. So these are thoughts that I want to throw in, but do something, don't just talk about it. And people have got together and say, okay, we'll get together and say, okay, well, let's do this. Put it in place, but don't do it spread out all over the place. Start really writing your book, getting out there, making things happen.
Great, thanks. So yeah, Matlala, you wanted to add some thoughts in, and I think we'll take these as the closing thoughts for this session, and then we'll tee up for Tony's session in a few minutes. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I'm thinking around the issue of government, the issue of corruption that we all are concerned about, and there's, you know, like you said, Evan, it's not a uniquely South African problem. You know, it's a problem that is experienced in a lot of countries. And one of the things that I've been talking with people around me about is instead of, you know, we don't directly have an influence where government is concerned. You know, you can influence government, of course, collectively through different structures, organizations, etc. But one of the things that we have power over is I can speak to my friends. I can confront a friend if they are corrupt. You know, I can ask a friend to say, you know, how did you get to acquire X, Y, and Z? As an example, when I have rapport, when I have a relationship with that person. So for me, I think it's one of the ways where we can begin to nip the bud of corruption, because if somebody comes and confronts me around my wrongdoing, I am most likely to worry if I get sanctioned by my group of friends than if I get sanctioned by people that I don't know, whereas I'm a member of government and I still get benefits of being a member of government, if you know what I mean. So I'm saying, you know, like they say in sports, in soccer, take the challenge to your competitor, you know, take the ball to the competition. I'm saying let's do that. Let's start doing that. Let's start confronting people that we are comfortable with, that we have a right to criticize, because at a distance, you don't know me, I don't know you, I don't care what you say, but I care about what my friends say.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that, John. I think that brings us back to exactly what we were saying. You know, we've got to start these things at home. We've got to start them, you know, in our circles around us and close to us as possible. But talking of kicking balls, I think we're going to kick the ball into Tony's court fairly shortly. So